This video is brought to you by Ridge. Stick around to hear more about the best wallet in the entire industry. Okay, today I want to talk about Destiny 2, but I need to preface this with a little bit of a disclaimer that I haven't actually been an avid Destiny player in quite some time. I don't follow the day-to-day, at least not frequently. I don't play every bit of new content that they release, and I don't see myself circling back around again until the inevitable release of probably Destiny 3. But I don't think that precludes me from discussing the recent events with their new transmogrification system. Transmogrification, commonly referred to as Transmog, is not an uncommon idea. The basic premise is to reskin or reshape existing items with a new visual aesthetic, sometimes by consuming other gear, sometimes by paying actual money, and sometimes completely free. That's the best case, but the end results are usually the same, which is to make one thing look like a totally different thing. The most common usage, at least in video games, is armor and weaponry in fantasy and sci-fi settings. You get something that looks cool and you switch the visuals onto an item that you are actually wearing yourself, thereby transmogging your gear, as a term, to make yourself look better. That's basically the entire premise, and like I said, it's been done hundreds of times before in other titles. Obviously, not every single implementation will be the same, but for the most part, a transmog system is done with a pretty well-defined framework where players can mix, match, and experiment with a decent amount of leniency. Well, that's not true in Destiny. Destiny 2, by far, has the worst transmog system I've ever seen in my life. Maybe there's something worse out there, maybe it's in a game I simply don't know about, probably in a mobile title somewhere, I'll give you that, but for a major AAA video game, this is hands down the worst, greediest, most asinine implementation I have yet come across, and we can't even blame Activision Blizzard in this case, because this time it's all on Bungie. Before that, though, sometimes you get sad virgin sponsors. Other times, it's the Chad Ridge wallet. Ridge is the best in the business. Industrial materials, damn near indestructible. Actually, I tried to destroy mine. I ran over it with my car, everything. It's still fine. Lifetime warranty and a 45-day trial period where you can test it and send it back for a full refund if you aren't satisfied. Ridge has a ton of different designs and colors with more on the way. You can switch between a clip or a strap. It has room for 12 cards plus cash. And in a world where Google reviews or user feedback in general is often false, manipulated, or flat out manufactured in a lot of instances, Ridge has tens of thousands of very real, very satisfied, 5-star customer reviews because their wallets really are an incredible product. Ever since they partnered with the channel, I have actually personally continued to buy from them. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, another one new design for myself when I felt like it. You name it, and I can't imagine switching back to a different wallet now after how well Ridge has held up during that time. If you use the link down below and enter code Upper Echelon, you'll get 10% off your entire order. Again, link down below, code Upper Echelon for 10% off on the best wallets in the entire industry. Big thank you to Ridge for sponsoring the channel. So why is the system so bad and how did we end up here? To fully understand that, we need to understand the fundamental desire behind a system like this to begin with. That's very important, which is visual customization and overall flexibility. The best example I can think of here is probably Warframe. It's another game. I'm not saying it's better than Destiny, but it's probably the best example for this. Warframe is what I consider to be an excellent transmog system, or it contains what I consider to be an excellent transmog system. So much so, in fact, that there is an entire pseudo-endgame cosmetic loop, which players often call Fashion Frame. Fashion Frame is exactly what you might think based on the name. You change how your frames look and make them as cool as possible. That's the whole thing. Now, there's an element of depth here that few other transmog systems actually have, owing to the insane color palette options and the intricacy of where they can be used and how and when, but the distilled premise is that you can constantly be changing things and looking different on a whim. That kind of flexibility makes a truly great transmog system. Now, to be fair, it's not all free, and I don't expect every transmog system to be entirely without cost. That would be a really stupid thing to expect. We live in a world where monetization thresholds have moved so far, I doubt they will ever go back. And in a game like Warframe, which is free to play, by the way, you must purchase certain color palettes for platinum, but even then, you can get platinum from other players by skillfully utilizing the in-game economy or trading systems. Bottom line, you can have a price tag on items. That's perfectly okay, or currency, while still crafting an overall system from the top down that does not feel oppressive or greedy or overall just predatory, and Warframe by far succeeds in that regard. Destiny 2 is the exact opposite. The core mechanic behind their entire transmog system is a time lock. Now, Time gating itself is not a new concept, not at all. It is often met with anger and backlash, generally speaking, that's true. Think of Genshin Impact and the resin system as an example, but it's not new. However, with Destiny 2, they have taken the idea of a customization system and time-gated it with an iron fist, basically forcing you to purchase insane amounts of premium currency in order to get past the artificially installed barriers. That runs directly against the entire point of a transmog system because it locks you out of actually customizing anything unless you pay excessive amounts of money or wait an insane amount of time. As a general overview here, and these numbers are not exact at all, there are well over 1,000 pieces of current legendary gear in Destiny. It's actually more like 1,400, I think, but again, not exact. And as it stands, the transmog system will only allow 10 pieces of gear to be indexed per 3-month cycle. It would take you over a decade to get even close to that number, and that's just what exists right now in the game, not including everything else that they add along the way. Now, it's true that you don't need to index everything. Not every player in every game will index every single item for a transmog system regardless of the framework, because not everything will be appealing to every single player, but there is another angle to look at here, because players who diligently grind this game, and have been doing so for years, and acquired most of or all of that gear previously in their time spent playing, will now have to either wait literal years in order to use even a fraction of it, or fork over insane amounts of money to index even just a tiny little portion of what they already worked many hours for. If you convert this down to a rough estimate in terms of silver, which is the premium currency in Destiny, it will equate to thousands of dollars. At the very least, many hundreds in order to build out even a small section of a library. Except, that's not even all they did. There were a spattering of other changes, which in my eyes were almost like salt in the wound, if we're being completely honest. Number one, bright dust pricing on shaders went from 40 to 300. And I'm not an expert on relative Destiny economy metrics, but that's a pretty wild increase if you consider that a typical transmog system is about creativity and constant customization. And number two, they made shaders cost 2,500 glimmer to apply, which again, not an expert over here, but from my time spent playing in the past, that's not where you want to be spending that particular resource. Basically, the system is as restrictive as possible in order to force players into the premium store. It's not balanced around even a passable attempt at customer fairness, or value especially, and instead goes headlong, Wile E. Coyote style into a fucking brick wall because Bungie has quite obviously taken this to an absolute extreme in their effort to force players, all of their players, frankly, into spending more money. Not an incentive, not a decent system with some overpriced stuff on top of it, which is kind of understandable at times. A restrictive, oppressive, greedy system designed to force everyone to pay up, else they can't even hardly use it. That runs in direct contradiction to what a transmog system typically should be, and also creates a phenomenon called choice paralysis. Choice paralysis is when someone is immobilized by the sheer amount of options, but much more importantly, as a function of fear, oftentimes. Someone who is not able to fork over hundreds of dollars to mix and match 10 times over, which is perfectly fine in other games and won't require 4 straight years of waiting as an alternative. Someone who can't afford to pay that will be met with an overwhelming amount of choices, but a restrictive number of times that they can use the system. They might have 1 or 2 items that they really like the most, but eventually, evidenced by the way that Warframe has succeeded in creating the fashion frame loop, or even how Fortnite, as an example, has capitalized on their giant library of skins, players will want to change how they look. And it's probably going to happen within 3 months, quite a few times. Visual customization can follow trends, personal whims, real-world pop culture, you name it, a bevy of things. And a transmog system designed from the ground up to stop you from doing anything other than 10 uses per 3 months? That's bullshit. Bungie looked at all of their current monetization models and saw a huge opportunity. A pretty large number of people signed off on this internally, obviously, and how in the world it got put through to the final stages, ultimately announced to the public, is baffling to me. Even worse, some people are defending this, and it makes you wonder what kind of sick Stockholm Syndrome type mentality would have to exist for someone to look at the wider industry of transmog systems in video games, and then look at Bungie and say, yeah, you did good here, Bungo, real good, great job. It's also kind of pathetic to think about the inevitable narrative shift that will take place when they likely change the system. Not change it to something good, mind you, not at all, but like raise the time gating caps or the usage limit or something benign like that. A lot of players will be like, oh my god, thank you so much, you listened, that's the new gold standard, transparency, love, great devs, yeah. But no, why? This should never have existed in the first place, and a slightly less bad timegate after they put in the worst system most of us have probably ever seen in our entire lives in gaming on this scale ever, it's not a win. It's not a good thing to make your god-awful decision less awful but still bad. It's a joke, it really is. They would need to completely redefine this system in almost every single major way in order to deserve praise. But even then, they shouldn't. But anyway, they will probably still get an outpouring of respect and praise when they raise the cap from like 10 to 30, even though it will still take half a decade to get the sets that are in the game as of right now, not even all of them. But by then the sequel will probably be out and will be their only focus. Setting aside all the issues I've already discussed, and there's a lot of them, there's another thing that comes to mind, which is relative player value as a function of timing. This happens with almost every single major video game release already, ever. Even more obvious, especially with the big name failures. But here, it would be pretty incredible. Imagine buying Anthem for $60 right at launch, and then 2 weeks later, it's a bargain bin $15 price tag. That means the timing contributed to you buying something for $60 and then others getting it soon after for a quarter of that cost. Well, now imagine that here, with Destiny 2's oppressive and intentional transmog funnel. There's a pretty huge amount of backlash on this, and if, during the first rotation of it for 3 months, which admittedly, yes, does have a 20 item cap limit instead of 10. Ooh, so generous, Bungie. Oh my god, thank you. Imagine if you spent $200 to get an actual library of cosmetics going. Well, then imagine that they announce a revamped system down the line, and all of your money was completely wasted because you gave it to Bungie, trying to circumvent the bullshit that they put in their game on purpose to trap you. And then they took it away after you paid the money. I don't know if that will happen. No one does at this stage as far as I'm aware, but why on earth do we even have to speculate on this? It shouldn't be happening in the first place. Bungie is currently collecting feedback on the Transmog system, if I'm informed correctly, and when they change it, they most likely will, they will probably get a big old pat on the back. I don't think they deserve it at all, but whatever. I don't play the game hardly at all right now. I really don't. I used to a ton. I don't anymore. Well, not as much. You can even see my footages from the old stuff I did years ago when I was making guides and the game had just first launched. And it won't actually affect me either way, but when a developer like Bungie, right? Like Bungie's not a low profile developer, makes a system like that, yeah, they deserve to get completely reamed for it. So here I am. But that's it. If you want to support, please consider watching the content on Odyssey. It's a YouTube platform alternative linked down below in the description, or subscribing on Locals for $5 a month. It helps with YouTube's monetization policies and how unpredictable they can be. Plus, you get completely ad-free versions of all the videos and the audio podcast versions as well. There's also another gaming YouTuber to check out, merch, social media, etc., but I'll cut it there. Also, Ridge, definitely buy a Ridge wallet. They're amazing. Yes, link down below. I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.